Welcome to the place where we wrap the arms of Jesus around you where you are, so that where you are becomes holy ground. The place, transforming your place into the place. Good afternoon, everybody, and happy August 1st. Listen, I'm Napoleon Bradford, and I'm so glad to be with you again for another amazing champion conversation hosted by not only the Cathedral of Champions, but the Place Health and Wholeness Center. We are the place. We are transforming your place into the place, because where you are right now is holy ground. Listen, it's August 1st, and I was led this morning into a conversation because August 1st, everybody's timeline has been talking about new beginnings. Everybody has been talking about the start of new seasons, the new beginning. It's day one of a new beginning. And what I realized is that even experiencing new beginnings or new seasons can be tied simultaneously with grieving past seasons or trauma still attached because of untreated areas in past seasons. I liken it to the excitement the Egyptians felt when leaving Egypt, and then subsequently the remembering of what they had when their trauma was triggered a few verses later. And so all of a sudden they realized they hadn't healed, even though they had left and were entering into a new season. So I wanted to bring in someone who is definitely capable of talking about grief, grieving, and transition. So she is a death doula. She is also an amazing woman of God. And so I wanted to invite my sister on to help us name, right? You think about August as a new month starting from scratch, but we want to name some of the grief that also partners with this new season. So, Dr. Jamie, come on in. It's so good to have you. Hold on, you're muted.
That's what happens when you're talking. So you mute so that you won't hear anything, and then you come on and I'm still muted. So yes, good to be here. Good for this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely wanted you to help us process, right? What are some immediate things that come to mind that could creep in and dampen the excitement of your new season if not talked about?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So unfinished business is what comes to mind first, right? Like I think for us to understand grief as a natural response to loss, and maybe think about loss in terms of, say, change, transition, right? And so maybe someone got a new job. Well, that's great if this is what you wanted, but the grief might be, I was at the other place for 20 years and I have relationships there. And so now my day will look different. That grief might be, um, I've invested myself into A, and now, although I'm really looking forward to B, I invested so much of myself into A. And so, what happens with that investment, right? And so, yeah, these new beginnings, August 1st, new transitions for so many people, but that doesn't mean that what we are transitioning from, that we're still not connected to in some way. If a
Mm,
relationship ends, July 31st, August 1st, you are no longer in that relationship. That does not mean that the compassion, that the experiences, that the love, that the care, that the desire for the person that you were in a relationship with is not still present, right? And so for us to really see grief as something that we experience in transition with death related and non-death related losses, with change, I think helps us really think about all of the emotions we feel when we're moving into a new season. And sometimes we have some sadness. I think that can help us appreciate a bit what the sadness might represent.
You said something amazing. You said that just because the season transitions doesn't mean you should feel pressured to have immediate cutoff or not, or feel guilty when you still lament or are connected to the past season. I know
Yeah.
that in some sessions or some places we're taught that you leave, you have a hard cut, and you block them, right?
Yeah.
Block them. Relationship ends, you block it, you block them, you unfriend them, you unfollow them. But is that really helpful all the time?
So not only is it sort of not helpful, it might not also be possible, right? To think that I am connected to something, and today, let's even think about relationships that are toxic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That just because the relationship ends does not mean that your affection for what you were connected to immediately ends. That there is a process of letting go. And so, yeah, just because this new season has come, you are moving into a new season, the idea that you must or that you can immediately disconnect from the person, place, or thing or idea that you were connected to, invested in. It's not even, if you really think about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not even realistic that we would immediately be able to cut something off. That there is, let's be clear. I am not saying this is absolute. So there are times when you can walk away from something and you are gone. But for most circumstances, in the letting go process, in the moving forward process, I should say, it's a process. It's a process of disconnection and in establishing new connections. It's a process of analyzing and processing and experiencing your feelings. And it's a process of allowing yourself to lament, of recognizing that you deserve the space to lament, that it is not wrong for you to still feel love or connected to the thing you left behind. And it takes time and work and sacred space and holy space and language. It takes all of that, and somebody with a good ear that'll listen to you without shame, right, and judgment. So yeah, you just because you left the thing, in some sense, like, doesn't mean the thing has left you, that you are disconnected from.
Wow. So then it's okay to be able to name the fact, announce the fact, even if just to yourself, admit the fact that I am not over it or I miss it.
Yeah, listen, and I'm glad you said, even if it's to yourself, right? So one thing for me is, I appreciate the idea that we have our truth and we need space to speak our truth, right? Speaking our truth, though, is not always making a public declaration. That the real, for me, idea behind speaking truth when it comes to my own personal life is me being able to admit it for myself, right? So me being able to say, Jamie, you haven't let that thing go. It's not that it's bad. It's, consider how much time and how connected you were to it. Give yourself some grace to grieve. Allow yourself to grieve. Name the thing. But I think in terms of what allows me to move forward in the process, I fully believe in being able to name a thing. I think anytime I do grief work, doula work, whatever space I'm sitting in, I start with being able to name, because I'm like, if we can't name some stuff, then it might be that much harder to push through some stuff. And so I think it starts with the naming, and it is okay for you to name for yourself I'm not over this thing. This thing still has a hold of me. I'm still feeling connected to it. I still love, I still desire. And while it's not good for me, or the season has ended, or the time is over, I'm going to need some time to move fully into my new. I think we ought to give ourselves and others that space.
And how do you differentiate when you're not missing the totality of it, but there are pieces that you miss that may not even be revealed until you encounter more progress in your new?
Yeah. Yeah. And often we don't miss the whole thing, right? Often
Yeah.
we miss little pieces of it. So some things only make themselves known in relationship, in right, as we are moving forward, right? So the whole being gentle with ourselves, the idea that, one, because grief is this sort of never ending experience, we learn how to live and have joy and laugh and learn with grief as we move forward in life. And so if I can understand that concept, then when it shows up, 3 months into this new experience, because something happened that reminded me of the thing from before, then I can pause. I can acknowledge what's coming up in me, right? Oh, Jamie, that took me back, right? Giving myself that acknowledgement, that space, but normalizing that, because it is normal that there is going to be something, there may be something that occurs that reminds you of a piece of the past. And in that moment, you might even travel back in your mind to the past. That happens. But allowing yourself the freedom, and the I think the healing of saying, this is what's coming up, doesn't mean I have to go back to it. It means I'm human. I can acknowledge it. Now that I've acknowledged it, let's move forward. And I also think that there are some things that come up for us that we can sort of unearth a bit, right? So I can see, well, what's coming up is a desire to be held. Is it possible in my today to be held, right? So what was awakened when I'm remembering, when I'm grieving, is that I was held. Well, maybe there's possibility to be held in my today, and I might need to identify ways to, in my today, to get some of the stuff that I am longing for, that say I've experienced before, right? So that, if again, I'm saying being held, but it could be being listened to. It is, can I be held today? Am I missing something? The thing that I'm drawn to, that I'm remembering, is it because I'm missing something? And if that's the case, is it something that I can have in my today?
So relational, I liken it to job, in the sense that maybe in your past job, the relationship you had with your boss, you could just say, look, I need 10 minutes to go run, right? But you find out on your new job,
right,
that in order to get off for 10 minutes, you got to submit a leave slip for half a day. Right. Which immediately causes you to lament your past job.
Right.
So in situations like that, and I'm sure that the celebration of new often comes parallel with some things that make us lament our past, do we throw the whole new out?
Right.
Because this is a red flag culture, right? And we want to quit everything at the pronouncement or perception of a red flag. But are all red flags in the new reason to retreat back to the old?
Yeah, and so no, right? No. That is where sort of wisdom and discernment ideally would come in, and we could ask ourselves questions like, I know I could get 10 minutes before, this is a new space, new circumstances, new relationships. And so is it that I have to build up my relationship to be able to get 10 minutes? Is it that this is not a 10-minute on your own, get your breathing culture, right? It is now, let me examine the whole thing though. The reason why I left or I am here is because of this. Just because we long for something, and I love that you did this job, just because I miss one element. I tell people all the time, I worked for Verizon for 15.83 years, and I know the exact time because that's what the paper said when I left. I would say 16, but they said 15.83 years. And I really did enjoy my job at Verizon, but I knew it was time for me to go. Now, I'll be really candid. Verizon and leadership, the income was wonderful. I had about 3 months of vacation. It was really a lovely thing. The work that I do today may not give me all of the perks that I had from Verizon. So there have been times when I was like, wow, I could just take off 2 weeks. But if I take off 2 weeks, that's almost all of my vacation, right? I long for a 3-month period where I could just take time off if I wanted to. But I also know that that is no longer the space for me, right? Verizon, wonderful salary, perks, right? Box seats at games, at concerts. It was wonderful. All of the things we like. And that was not the space for me. And so when I come up to an obstacle that I know I might not have faced at Verizon, this is time for me to decide what is sort of my purpose? Where am I supposed to be? Why am I here? And usually I come to the conclusion that this is where I am supposed to be, in spite of the fact that it's 2 or 3 good perks over there that I would love to bring into this world. So we got to really explore. I left A for B. Sometimes you leave not because it's bad, but because it's time. We got to sit back and we got to think a bit before we make the decisions. And in terms of sort of like these things that we call sort of red flags, things popping up, and I think the flag itself can draw our attention to behavior that might not be welcomed, whether it is our behavior or behavior of those that we're working with, right? So if we see something, it's good to sit back and say, I don't like that. But that doesn't mean that I leave every time I don't like something. And one of the things I was talking to with a client before was there are some things that may be, say, trauma or traumatic or triggering, right? Where I cannot be in this space. And then there are other things that bring some discomfort that I have to learn how to work through and manage differently. And so just because I am uncomfortable doesn't mean I have to leave, right? Discomfort is not necessarily case for dismissal. That discomfort might be an opportunity for growth, right? And so that's what I think about. There are some things from our past, whether it's relationships or jobs or whatever, churches, all of that we would love in our today. But that doesn't mean we can't sit back and appreciate our today. And so I think that's what it boils down to today.
Amazingly, you said, and this is what I wrote down, but you said something that really could be beneficial in the naming, which is not just naming the area, but also naming the area in respect to the big picture.
Yeah.
Right. And then you talked about communicating. So maybe if you're told no to the 10 minutes, you could communicate why this 10 minutes is so necessary and how it was and how they could flex on the new job or in the new space, right? And I think one thing that we have to do a better job of in stewarding new seasons is being able to communicate things as they occur.
Yeah.
So that red flag, that trigger, things that remind you, new barriers, being able to just talk about them then.
Yeah. But that takes, so many of us have had to swallow our pain, our grief, our trauma, our traumatic experiences. We've had to swallow our voices for so long, right? And here's another thing, and I get this from my sister preacher friends, the good reverend doctors, who are talking about attempting to raise their children in a way that their children recognize that they have agency. And we don't always raise children to know that they have agency, right? And so hear me where I'm going. So we raise children and we don't let them know they have agency, but then we expect them to exercise agency in the world, right? We expect them to be able to engage in conversation. Hey, when they feel uncomfortable, we want you to tell people you feel uncomfortable. We want you to speak up when you're in the work, right? But they've never had a chance to practice that at home with us, that when they try to exercise agency with us, and I don't have children, so hear me though, I'm learning from my sister friends and my brother friends. When they try to exercise agency at home, we squash their voices, but then we expect them to have a voice when they're in the workplace. We don't give them an opportunity to disagree. And I'm saying respectfully, sure, we don't give them an opportunity to disagree or to ask questions, but then we expect them to go into the workplace and to be able to say, oh, well, they said I can't do this. I wonder if there's another way that I can engage this conversation that we can talk about. We don't do that at home, and then we expect them to be able to do it in the workspace, right? So that part. But yes, being able to say, hey, I wonder if this is something that we can, being able to identify my needs, because that's what that part of that is, right? Being able to say, during the course of the day, if I'm on the computer for a long portion of the day, I have to step away for at least 15, 20 minutes, or I can't think straight. Everything runs together. Well, I need to be able to identify that as a need for me so that I can communicate that. And we can only do that when we know we have agency. And I don't think we do a great job of helping at least our children know they have agency. So when they get into the workplace, how they going to exercise something that they never really realized they had.
So teaching agency to become self-advocates for the purpose of valuing, but if being able to identify what is valuable and necessary for you, and then to articulate it in a non-aggressive way to make sure that you're getting what you need in a situation.
Yeah. And we know that, and you know what, Doc, let me say this. We know that there are some things that I wish for a workplace that are just not there. Right. And that's when it comes to sort of self-negotiation. Is this a space that I want to be in, although A, B, and C are not here? Is it worth me leaving? Let me add this up now. Is it worth me leaving this space? One of the reasons I'm not where I was is because I wanted to do work that was more heart driven. Don't get me wrong, right? But I could not do that work there. Well, just because I don't have all of the perks, I need to. Does it outweigh what I have now? And so, yeah, making that decision that everything you want may not be in that space. You might need to create a space for yourself. And we can talk about that later, sort of entrepreneurship, creating your own space to do the work that you love. And even the grief that comes with starting your own thing and having to let go of other stuff as you grow, right? That part. But second part is, how do I identify my needs and learn how to communicate that effectively to the community that I'm working with, that I'm engaged with, that I relate to every day? It's a necessity.
Now, you mentioned a word just now that is something I don't think we have learned to do well, which is self-negotiate, in the sense of being able to weigh pros and cons and decide and then counter with what you need.
Yeah.
And that's in any setting.
Any setting. Yep. And guess what? And here's the part. Giving ourselves permission to get it wrong sometimes. Right? With all of the self-negotiating and all of the planning that we do, it may not come out 100% as we expected. We might find ourselves on the road to the thing that is the thing we're supposed to do, right? And so, but being able to, I am learning how not to make decisions, like right now in this moment. If somebody asks me to preach, I say, oh, thanks for the opportunity. Let me check my schedule. Dr. Tina Stewart one time said, "Stop taking dates in the street," right? Like not necessarily to me, but she was saying, look at your calendar, right? Like sometimes you need to pause and think. And that helped me a great deal because now I pause and think not just about the calendar, but about my capacity. And for me, self-negotiating is looking at what I need, what I have the capacity to do, what I'm willing to accept, what I'm willing to compromise and bargain about. Like it's work. And I don't always get it right. And so there's grace there. But I'm willing to go ahead and do the negotiating, even though I may not always get it right.
Do you give yourself space for renegotiation? Do you give yourself space to say, look, I know we said this, but it's not working?
Yeah, listen, being able to renegotiate, being able to say, I've really given this some thought and I cannot do this. Now, I try. So here's the balance, right? If I say yes to someone, that's why I'm thinking and doing all this negotiating before I say yes. Because when I say the yes, I want to keep the yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that there have been times in my past, long ago, where I have said so many yeses, and then as I'm sitting here thinking through my space, my capacity, I realize I have to renegotiate because sometimes things come up, and you don't realize that you no longer have the capacity or the bandwidth or the time. And so being able to renegotiate, being able to be honest and with integrity say, I know this is what I asked for, and I thought this was going to be enough. But having worked here now for 6 months, I realized that what you said about A, B, C, and D really doesn't make up for, the thing I'm asking for. So yeah, being able to renegotiate. But all of this, and I'm glad you put on this, all of this though is a naming. All of this is a pausing and a naming what's happening. It's a naming what I need. It's a naming what I'm experiencing. It's a naming what I think. All of this still sits with, am I willing to name what's happening with me?
This is so important. And the reason I think it's important, right? Going back to the illustration of the Egyptians earlier, getting to the Red Sea, excited, and then having challenge that causes them to immediately want to retreat and go back to bondage. You and I both have stepped out in seasons and left everything comfortable behind. And the enemy, we both preachers, so the enemy knows how to exploit that gap between the stepping out and the success, or the stepping out and some sustainment, right? Just right, or some source from that gap. The enemy knows how to show up in that gap and remind you through fractured screenshots of what you had to try to get you to go back. So how do we encourage those who are stepping out boldly in this new season to be able to navigate the unknown and be able to ignore the enemy's attempts to get them to return?
Yeah, it's so, you said that. First thing I want to do is I want to identify the obstacle, right? Because sometimes it's external, right? Sometimes it's other voices coming in saying, you left all that behind. You what you gonna do now? You can't even pay all your bills. I thought you was gonna, sometimes it's sometimes it's that, but sometimes it is us. And we have sort of a warped sense. Hear me, y'all. Hear my intention here, and I'm gonna try to say it right. We have this sort of warped sense of what success looks like. And we have these unrealistic expectations of what it takes to sort of live with ourselves in peace and harmony,
Mhm.
right? Like this idea that I've stepped out, and so now everything will align just like I need for it to align. And I don't know that that happens. Now, we know that there are some who have privilege and wealth that they can decide tomorrow they're going to start something, and they have the capital behind them to do it. Not talking about them, right? That's a whole nother conversation. I am talking about from the time you decide to plant a seed, that just because you planted the seed in perfect soil does not mean that you can walk back outside tomorrow and see the full bloom of the thing that you planted. Right. And so the enemy, or the thing in us that has us on an unrealistic timetable, the thing in us that has us wanting to prove to everyone, including ourselves sometimes, that we made the right decision, that we're still worth it, even though we left something behind, right? My first thing is, let's check that. Like, let's check the inner voice that causes us to, and I'm checking mine every day. Check the inner voice that's causing us to compete, that's causing us to develop these unrealistic expectations, that's causing us to create this image of success that really, the truth is, that ain't even what we want. What we want is joy and peace and comfort and the ability to be creative and to know that our needs are going to be met, right? That's what that's the thing that we want. So checking that voice in ourselves that says we are less than because we have not achieved a certain level of success. That's one thing. Second thing is, I say check our circles, because I am surrounded by people who love and who nurture me. Now, this does not mean they don't give me feedback. In fact, I sent a video. I don't even know what her title is, but she's like a videographer. She's a multimedia expert. She's wonderful, does these great videos, right? Want to do a documentary with her. I sent her something today. I was like, here's my commercial. And she said, Doc, listen, I'm glad you used the camera and not Facebook. Like, you used the camera. That's a good thing. Good job. This video too long. This too long. I can't. I listened to what you said and I shortened it to from 4 minutes. Here is your 72 seconds. So, but and I looked at it and I was like, well, dang. But I laughed because it was so the inner voice that's telling us we're not worthy, so we got to do some work there. But people who are around us who will love and nurture and support us, but will also be able to provide sort of feedback, right? Coaching when necessary. People who can call us in. My mama calls me in sometimes. She'd be like, come here. I don't think that was a great idea. So who can call us in? And then the other thing is, know that all of the emotions that we're feeling, that desire to go back to the thing that felt like the good thing, because when this don't feel so great, the good thing, it feels like I want to run back to it, knowing that that is part of the process. But what do you have in place that when you desire to go back to the good thing, what are your checks and balances? What's the thing you say to yourself when you feel I need to go back? What is your mantra? What is your affirmation? Or is it that you have to call somebody and say, girl or bruh or sibling, this is how I'm feeling today. Where are your checkpoints? And those can be people, that can be yourself, but you need to have some checks that can remind you that just because you don't see it today doesn't mean it's not working out in the way that you desire it. And then again, normalizing grief, that it's part of the process. And just because you feel it, don't mean you are not healthily moving forward. And just because an emotion rises up in you doesn't mean that you haven't done some good work to process and to let go. But that new circumstances may awaken something new, and you just need to sit back with it, give it space to breathe, but don't allow it to swallow you up. So those are like 4 things I would let people talk to people. But I think it starts with, there's something a friend of mine wrote on Facebook today. And since she wrote it, I think I can even name it. Attorney Natasha Robinson wrote something about being able to either lean into sort of lack or lean into abundance, right? That when something comes up, do you think that do you automatically move toward in your mind that everything is wrong and I need to let it go? And that's not what she said, but this is where I'm going. Needed to let it go, that it's wrong, that I made a mistake. Or when something comes up, do you look and say, how do I get around this? How do I move through this? How do I adjust? Right. And so that mindset of when something is not working in the way that you think it should, especially as entrepreneurs, it doesn't mean that all is lost. It might mean it's time to go back and reevaluate. It might mean that it's time to think through a bit differently, but giving ourselves that space and permission. And again, permission to change your mind. You may create something and on your way to it, say, you know what, now I know the thing I'm supposed to be doing. I know I told y'all it was A, but I guess I had to see A in order for me to actually see B. And B is the thing I'm supposed to be doing. So giving yourself that space and trying to find some joy as you journey through this whole thing.
Man, that's good. That's good. So this circle, self-circle, how do you handle, how do you lament, how do you grieve the disconnection that may come through discovery? In other words, we used to talk all the time, but now I'm trying to discover some things in this new, and I don't have the time. Right? I can't hang out. I can't do Taco Tuesdays.
Yeah,
every
that's
Tuesday.
so good. That's so good. Because go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish.
No. I'm just saying. So how do you? Because part of what may draw you back is this isolation or this loneliness that comes from this season of self-discovery of your new.
Yeah. Can we normalize for a minute though that part of our growth, part of growing and maturing is self-discovery, and self-discovery cannot always be done in groups, right? That I'm not discovering the group, I'm discovering myself in new ways. It's rediscovery, it's unearthing, it's getting to know. And I'm not the person who tells you like cut people off and just move on. I'm not saying that. But there are also different kinds of relationships, right? And so there are some people who, when I was in my sort of isolation discovery planning stage, who they might have checked in with me once a week, but before we might have talked every couple of days. And the check-in might only been via text because that's the capacity that I had. And so recognizing, one, that we don't own people. And so as someone is going through their self-discovery period, sometimes maybe just saying, what do you need? Do you like, can I check in on you every now and then and see where you are? Or is this allow them to go on their journey and know the possibility of y'all connecting again the way that y'all did before? Or appreciating the presence that they played in your life while they were in your life in that way? That it is okay to grow and to change and to discover that, you know, and to take time out for discovery. It's okay to do that. In fact, I think it's a requirement. I think it's a necessity. But we have to be okay within ourselves to know that just because Dr. Napoleon needs some time for self-discovery, he is not anti-Jamie. He is not against Jamie. He is not saying, oh, I don't even like her like that. It is, I need to do this for me. And can I give you space to do your discovery for you without making it about me? And so, it's sometimes we make people's journeys about us. And no, you need some time, sis, bro, sibling, I'm going to give it to you. And listen, can I dream with you? And you might say, nah, I really got to do this on my own. Okay. I'm probably still going to be dreaming for you over here, but I'm going to give you the space to do what you need to do. We need people like that in our lives, because if there's anyone who, when you sort of need a moment to breathe, to think, to interrogate yourself, if the people in your life can't grant you that, then we need to talk about the nature of our relationship. There's probably some work we need to do with our relationship.
So in that same vein, I have to be strong enough to step out into self-discovery unapologetically. without feeling I have to come back in and tag all the time to make sure I'm still connected. Because then I can't really fully self-discover if I'm coming back all the time to make sure you're good in seasons where this is about discovering what's out there. And I thought about relationships because I know oftentimes, sometimes new seasons are unannounced because you want to work on them, right? It's nothing you bring your girlfriends around the table and say, look, this is what I'm about to do. Now, sometimes we do that.
Right.
For their support, but sometimes seasons happen so abruptly that we don't have the time to, and sometimes because we don't want to necessarily jinx it, possibly, or mess it up. So how can we be inclusive, because we may need their support, but also be selective in what we share to kind of protect our peace as we're in this new season?
Yeah. And so I ask us to check ourselves, right? Because I do believe that there are sometimes you find yourself in the lab, and the next thing you know, you've been in the lab for 2 weeks and you've been away, right? So part of me is saying that because you and I have cultivated a relationship, that in this relationship, I'm probably going to come back and say, listen, I know I've been distant, but I'm working on something. Listen, I'm gonna check out. I might check back in and maybe give me 30 days. I may do that, because I do think that relationships are important. And that if we've cultivated something, for me, I think we can share that, right? I also think that the folks who are part of that circle are discerning. The folks who are part of that circle, they're not going to take your ideas. In fact, they may even give you something that makes them better. And so there might be times when you invite people in to dream with you. And I'm not saying that happens all the time, but I am confident enough in who I am today that I can bring a lot of folks into the room and we can talk about visions of how we support communities and people in grief and loss and death and dying. And I can be in that space and not feel like they're going to do this before me. They're going to jump, right? Like, so that is my confidence in me today. I think that we have to start to grow that confidence in ourselves, that we know that the thing we're doing is our thing. And lots of people might do something like it, but it's not ours. So if I need to step away from friends, step away. But if we are connected in this way, so I think we're giving some people benefits that they don't deserve. I think sometimes we are trying to, well, let me tag and let everybody know what I'm doing. I'm not talking about that group out here. I'm talking about this group.
Your core.
Right. Because you disappearing, they probably won't come for you anyway.
Yeah.
The folks out here ain't coming for you, but right here, they're going to come for me. And so whether they come for me or I just make it known, I think part of our relationship is that we that's what we deserve with each other, is to be able to say, listen, y'all, I'm in the lab the next 30 days. And then that way I know, okay, Napoleon said he in the lab for 30 days. It's September 4th. He ain't said nothing to nobody. Let me just send a quick.
That's good.
Right. But I'm going to give you your time. And I know that your time for you does not mean that you have dismissed me. Now, if there are some things that you discover during your time that you say, Jamie and I, and I'm just using myself as an example, Jamie and I are not really, we ain't really seeing eye to eye in the ways that we envision doing this ministry work or something together. Then we reevaluate the friendship and do what's necessary there. But outside of that, yeah, bro, I'm going to give you your time. And I know that you taking time to do your thing. I'm celebrating you because I need you to do it. Because I need you to do it. So,
man, that's good. That's good. That's good. I was listening, and what I kept hearing was really part of self-discovery. Even though we said it's not group-based, part of self-discovery is discovering who is actually in your circle, your inner circle. Really discovering who is in your inner circle especially as you're preparing for this new season, because there may be a shift in people as you go through. I also heard, and this, you blessed my whole life with this going in the lab, right? This, you see a lot of people saying, well, I'm taking a break from Facebook for 30 days, or you may not hear from me for 25 days, or, whatever. But this idea that it's normalizing seasons of separation for your own self, right?
And that's a womanist
not
concept,
in a bad way.
Right? That's part of womanism, is separating myself for sort of self-renewal, self-care, for nurturing of self, for my well-being. Being able to do that, and not that you have to be a woman, right? But being able to know when you need to step away to do that for yourself. Doc, let me tell you this. January 23rd was my last day as director of program development for an organization that I helped, whole story, I helped rebuild them, right? Like I was disappointed, but I also had vision that I was going to leave that place in August, right? So that was my own story there. But I was disappointed because the ending did not end the way I thought it should. One, I needed control of the ending, and the control of the ending was taken from me. So that's that part of it, right? Second thing is, in that moment, I said, I said, God, this was my language for me, right? I was like, God, I need 6 months to be in a lab, to rediscover me, to work on some things, to flush out some of this vision. I got 50 things going on, God, and I think it needs to come down to 2-3 things that you're going to have. Because sometimes you need to do that, right? So sometimes we need, and I know that everybody is not going to get 6 months. I get it, that there's a certain amount of privilege that even comes with me being able to say, I need 6 months. But I got 6 months to almost to the day.
Wow.
Before the new assignment. And what I'm saying is everybody can't get 6 months, but everybody deserves a moment to get into their lab, to start to experiment, right? To see what's working, what ain't. Like, you need to, and this is mental, emotional, creative. This is to explore your relationships. Even in your lab, you might be thinking about, I ain't so kind with them. I need to, like, the lab. When can we go and get in the lab for ourselves? I think that's a necessity in this work. And I think friendships can withstand sort of laboratory assignments, right? I think relationships can withstand you being in the lab for a few, for a semester. I believe that those things can withstand your laboratory assignments.
Wow. So sometimes these new seasons that we're talking about can simply be laboratory seasons where you do the self-discovery before even something else. My Karen, she loves the lab, right? She just today launched a new ed tech reading program that she's been working on. And so, and she doesn't mind it. So I'm the guy that can't put my phone down. I'll be, she cannot do Facebook for like 3 weeks. Like, not in like, she does something I never even heard people do. She logs out of Facebook on her phone. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought that just not having the app open was enough. But she is good at that. And I think she's able to produce.
Yeah.
She's also mastered in the season of the lab a different timetable. In other words, she's sensitive. So you were talking about waking up earlier. If she wakes up at 2:00 and can't go right back to sleep,
see what it means. Yeah, see what it means.
Because, and so I say all that to say, in your new season, some things that you grieve over is your own timetable, your old timetable, and your old practices.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to be okay saying it's the new normal in this new season that I'm gonna wake up at 2 and I'm gonna do the work. I'm not gonna just lay in the bed and stare at the ceiling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Discerning the so I think one of the worst things we can do is not sort of, you know, we talk about reading the room, reading your own rhythm in room, right? And so I know I'm waking up earlier now. I wake up early anyway, but I know that part of that is weather, is sun. The new day says it's a new day. That's part of it for me. But I also know that I am in creation mode. And so I wake up and it's time for me to create. I think sometimes we have these old habits, and I've been there, that when the new time comes, when this change comes, we're still living with these old habits. Here's one. I had an sort of relationship challenges, right? So married, learning how to make this thing work, but it was like it was hard as heck trying to figure this thing out. I became best friends with like Insomnia Cookies. Like best friends. They deliver them 2 a.m. They warm. Listen, right? And I'm saying it. So and I stayed up all night long. Like I was doing all of the bad habits that we pick up, right? And I'm not saying eating cookies is a bad habit, but eating a lot of cookies might not be a good one. So I picked up all of these habits. My season was changing, but my behavior had not changed. So it took a good 3 weeks for me to say, Jamie, you're ordering cookies out of habit, not because there's something in you that desires a cookie, not because your circumstance feels low and this cookie is comfort. There's literally nothing there that a cookie will satisfy. You're getting cookies because you were used to ordering cookies on these 2 days of the week. You're ordering from this place because you are used to do. And so some seasons require different behaviors. And then I had to let go of that and grieve it too. It is just because it's a bad habit doesn't mean you don't grieve it. And so the question is, as we move into whatever we're creating, whatever we're believing for ourselves, and there are going to be some habits, some behaviors, some ways of showing up that no longer serve us well. And are we willing to and able to, right? Because willing to, I think, is the start, right? Are we willing to and able to let those behaviors go? Are we willing to be challenged to let them go so that we can, one, enjoy the new season or the new space that we're in, but two, so that we can that we are able to function in the way that we need to function in the new space? Because some of those old behaviors won't work in this new space, and it will really work against us. And so what does that look like for you to know that a new season is coming, to lament, to grieve because there's change, to be hopeful because it's something new, to not know that if you're an entrepreneur, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm ready to go forward. And these behaviors here, the behavior for working at someone else's office might not be the same behavior that is needed when you are an entrepreneur, right? Like it may require you to get up early and not just show up in the office at 9. It might require you to do some things different. Are we willing to do those things? The behavioral changes, the mindset changes. Are we willing to read the room, read our circumstances and this particular text here, and make the adjustments necessary so that we can be successful? Doesn't mean it's going to sell 1 million copies. And I'm wishing everybody 1 million copies, but right. I'm wishing, listen, and know that if I did the thing I set out to do, can that be a measure of success? That I said I was going to do it and I did it. I'm successful.
Wow. This has been amazing. This has been amazing because you just touched on something that I think a lot of people don't know or have not done. which is being able to discern what habits are no longer beneficial in new seasons, right? With new beginnings, you have to be able to release yourself from habits that may not be bad habits.
Right.
They're just not beneficial where you're going.
Right.
And you can't operate in the way you did in Egypt in the promise. You can't even operate like you did in the wilderness in the promised land. There is a new expectation that occurs that you must be able to let go of those not bad habits, but old habits.
Right. Non-beneficial ways of being. It's no longer, I ask myself, I know this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but does it serve me well today? And sometimes the answer is no. And then I got to let that thing go because it's not bad, but it's also not beneficial. And I really don't want anything that's not beneficial, that's not nurturing, right? And nurture doesn't always feel good, right? So I understand that. But yeah, letting some of those behaviors go so that I can be who I need to be in the season I'm in.
I think that's where we're going to end. I think the best way to end today, right? Your homework assignment for those who are watching is to really do some self-discovery, right? Name some things that you're grieving. And then, like Dr. J just said, discern if you're grieving because they're hurting you, or if you're grieving because you're missing them in your new, and you need to have a negotiation, some self-negotiation, or are you grieving because you're realizing that they are not beneficial in your next? They might have been beneficial. They may even be beneficial in your right now. But since you know you're moving toward what God has for you in this new pursuit, it may not be beneficial to binge watch shows every day, right?
Right.
You may not need to start a new series. It's not that it's a bad habit. And when you're in your old season where you were doing a regular 9 to 5 and you had the weekends, you might be able to binge Murder, She Wrote while you iron clothes. But in this new season where every moment counts.
Yeah. TV off.
TV off. Woo, woo. And really, if you like me, you might need to save some of that money from them streaming apps. You might need to repurpose.
But that's rediscovery. Huh? Really realizing all of the changes you might need to make that are more beneficial. If I tell you the stuff I gave up for this season, listen.
You're right. But that's part of that self-discovery. So your homework as you're leaving this space, and I want to give you a chance. Listen, I don't know if this blessed anybody. I want to give you space to sow. If it blessed, and it's a weird ask. I'm new at this thing. Jamie, I don't even know if you do sewing on your things when you do your own things. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm entering into a new space.
Yeah. We gotta talk about that, because here's the thing. I do have an offering, right? That is a sort of free will, donate what you can, but if you can't donate, you can still show up kind of offering. But that our relationship with money and resources also needs to be part of our self-discovery.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the truth is streaming costs money. My Zoom is $60, $65 a month. And I'm not asking people to, just understand that
there is cost.
There's cost and invest. When somebody, I think that when you feel like this was good for me, so $1, $100, like it's so yeah. So I do ask people if they're able and they want to absolutely, because I said it's good ground. When you give here, you give into good ground. So absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to put some ways to sow into the place.
Yeah.
Right. If you felt this was beneficial, if you feel that any of these nuggets added value to you, or to where you are in this now moment, or what possibly is to come, because this is something you could possibly rewatch or share with someone that you know is trying to navigate a new season, but is constantly grieving their old season.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna give you space to sow. I want to thank Dr. Jamie, because listen, to be perfectly honest, she carved out time for me, because about 9 o'clock this morning I had this great idea about this topic, and she's given me time, and I value her. She knows, well, she knows Lady B, me, her, we rock, right? There's a limited crew that we have that we go to, and she always blesses me and helps us navigate things. So I definitely value her voice in every season I'm in. So I thank you, Jay, for coming on,
Of course.
taking time out of your busy schedule as you're navigating your new as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And God is just so amazing. So tell us, you got some stuff coming up. So I need you to let me move this stuff out the way. Y'all have had a chance. I'm gonna leave it in the bottom thing, but Jay, what's that coming up?
So we have our 6-week, our signature sort of learning through grief coming up. 6-week. It is $2.99. You can pay in installments. You get all 6 sessions in a group. The group is only 25 people or less because we want to keep it small. You get all 6 sessions. You get one personal session with me. You get a self-care kit with some body butter. And if you ever had the body butter, you know it's good for your skin.
Oh, we've had the body butter.
Good for your skin. You get a workbook. It is worth more. And Dr. Napoleon will tell you all the stuff that we do is certainly worth much more than we price it at, right? And so it is certainly worth more than $2.99, but it is $2.99. If you follow me on Facebook or Twitter or any of the Dr. Jamie Eady, if you look that up, you'll find me, and then you'll see that tagged. Or you can go to www.thoughtfultransitions.org, and the information will be there for you as well. And then on Fridays, it's the Girlfriend's Guide to Grief. And this is our free offering. Mostly Black women attend, but it is an offering that we offer to the community so that we can talk about grief a little bit, but give people some space to process in community. And then stay tuned for some conferences and some other workshops that we have coming up. And Dr. Napoleon, one thing, one of the ways that I serve in grief in the community now is with an organization called Anti-Violence Partnership Philadelphia. And I provide homicide-specific grief support. So it is that kind of grief that I'm providing to the community. That's a whole nother thing. But just so folks know that I am supporting people through grief, whether it is sudden or traumatic, or if it is sort of violent loss in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm doing it in Southwest and West Philadelphia, which is where I was born and raised. So it's really very dear to me. And so, that's where I am. Oh, last thing. What is it called? The Hope That Lights the Way is a documentary that I'm a part of. It's not out yet, but stay tuned for it. It is a documentary about Philadelphia, specifically Black boys and men, and the cycle of violence and hope. And so The Hope That Lights the Way, if you look that up, you'll be able to see the trailer. It is a beautiful documentary, and I can't wait for it to hit all of the streaming platforms. So that's where I am.
Man, so listen, did you just say in West Philadelphia, born and raised?
Born and raised. Listen. Listen.
I had to say it. That's what I heard. Listen, I want to thank you, Dr. J, for your time. I want to thank all of you for watching. Please, as you watch the replay, as you share it with others, please continue to remember to give yourself grace to grieve in these seasons of transition. And grief does come in positive places. right? It's not just affiliated or associated with negative things.
Yeah.
All right. Y'all have an amazing day. Thank y'all. Love
Peace.
y'all. To God be the glory. Goodbye.